guys. Today I want to talk to you about a group. Well, okay, see, I mean, here's the thing. Like, when I started this website back in the 90s, like the 1990s, Um, and so a lot of what was just absolutely whatever the most current blah 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 thing that I wouldn't bother to cover because everybody knew about it, and because I like to dig deep and get kind of obscure. All that new stuff now has basically become history. Uh, and like now I've got people like watch my videos, read my blog, like talking to me who weren't even born yet when I got started. So some of the stuff that I wouldn't have bothered to cover back then because I thought, oh well, that's just everybody knows about that. That's perfectly current. And that's how I still kind of think about it. But I sort of realized, because it's history, I want to talk about a group that's sort of basically, I think, largely been forgotten. Now, not necessarily if you're like a hardcore digger, you're like, I remember these guys, Warner, you're not the only one. I'm not saying I'm the only one. But they're definitely no longer really talked about in the way that they definitely should be. Because this is a 90s group into the early 2000s, lasted just a short time. I'm talking about, to cut to the chase, Unspoken Heard. So now, even if you are thinking that you haven't heard of Unspoken Heard, you might actually have heard them, or at least half of them, because if you know the show, of course, Boondocks, the cartoon that started, I think, on UPN, then went to Cartoon Network based on the comic strip, has a pretty classic, banging opening theme song. I mean, when you think of, sitcoms, cartoons, whatever on television with a hip-hop theme song, you're lucky if it isn't just rank and embarrassing. And then sometimes you get something that's sort of okay, like in Living Color had that pretty nice theme, or I don't know, like Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, like that's sort of as credible as you got. But the Boondocks had a killer song, like a song you would actually want to hear outside of the context of just the opening to the show. Like, put it on a mixtape, it holds up, it's really good. And that's because they got a Shiru of Unspoken Heard. The song, I am the stone that the builder refused. Like, that's, you want to hear that. And that's why, and just like that theme song, all of Unspoken Heard holds up in a really surprisingly and compelling way. I say surprising because there's a lot of dope stuff in the 90s coming out, like, on top of each other. And some of it hasn't aged well as others, but Unspoken Heard is pretty fantastic still right now in 2020. So Unspoken Heard consisted of two guys, Ashiru, who I just mentioned, and Blue Black, who was brothers or cousins or something, with the guy who ran Seven Heads Records, which was their label, which is a dope label overall. They put out stuff by like J Live, Mr. Complex, De La Soul, but they really focused especially on Unspoken Heard. So Unspoken Heard came out with their first release, Cosmology, in 1997, and then their first single in 1998, Better, backed with Smiley. And by the way, this one's interesting. These are my original cassette singles and EP. This one's not on Discogs or anything, so I guess it's pretty rare. It has a picture cover that you wouldn't ordinarily see, so I'm giving you a chance to check it out now. Naturally, stuff also did come out in vinyl. They had their kind of crazy logo here. And that's where it's much more common and more easily found today. And they're the same track listings. The only difference is the vinyl also included like the instrumentals, once in a while an acapella, but song-wise, they're exactly the same. So Unspoken Heard was an indie group from Washington, which is another reason why they might not be pinging everybody's radars. With some interesting production. Here in those credits, DJ Spin of the Jigmasters and Bedroom Wizard, of course, Virginia, Super Friends, and all that. They also had a lot of production from Osmosis, from the Aboriginals, which is another slept-on indie group. So Cosmology, just the 4 songs. Each one has a solo song. Ashiro has Mid-Atlantic, Blue Black has Rising Sun, and then they each have a song together. These guys are really successful on like a number of levels. They're conscious, they got this sort of very kind of slightly artsy vibe, sort of like Native Tongues, Next Generation. Maybe a little bit more straightforward, more pure hip-hop, but just barely. Production-wise, they've got a really interesting kind of sound that... they worked with multiple guest producers, like I just mentioned, but they must have had to handle the production themselves because there's a consistency across all their releases over the years. Not that many years, like 4 years they existed, but all that time they released a lot of stuff, a lot more records and tapes that I'm going to get to show you. But they had like often very sample heavy. There are a few like the DJ Spin's track that has that kind of boop 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 early 2000s stuff that you would expect. Although it sounds good, but it is what it is. But mostly like it's very kind of sample based, but it's often like kind of layered samples that don't 100% fit together. Not totally wildly like discordant, but just slightly sound a little bit off. Like you kind of tell like that piano track didn't go with that other loop, and they're kind of mushing them together. But then their flow, which is very kind of stylish and smooth in a way, but also kind of pure and straightforward, but it really just glues it all together and makes a track work. You listen to the instrumentals, you might say, that sounds a little disjointed, you know, it sounds pretty dope, but when you hear it with the vocals, it just sounds excellent. Just as strong lyrically, like you think 90s and early 2000s stuff, you think a lot of punchlines, right? A lot of corny similes and all that kind of stuff. Very jokey. And there is some humor in this. There's definitely some, you know, smart, inventive, clever wordplay in their lyrics. But it's never, you know, it's subtle. It's never like, here, let's stop what they're saying, just say, here's a joke, here's a punchline, here's a punchline. It's mixed into whatever they're saying. Like, and again, not that every song they're saying is pure, deep message, preachy kind of stuff. Like Mid-Atlantic, the first song, a Shuri solo song, is basically just him flexing his skills and just sort of, you know, putting words together to sound dope. You know, if it's saying anything, it's basically just saying, you don't have to be from New York or LA to sound good, and so he's flexing his skills while not being from those places. That's basically what Mid-Atlantic's about. But then you have something like Blue Black solo song, Rising Sun, which is really, you know, deep and meaningful and smart and well researched, as you find out if you read the liner notes, about a son who sees his father die. It talks about sort of the lasting effects of slavery in modern America. It's really pretty compelling. And by the way, actually, I'm calling it Rising Sun. Technically, it's called Rising Sun Part 2. And the reason for that is, before even Cosmology, Blue Black had a solo single. The first release any of these guys put out, that would have been like 1995. It was called Bon V. But the B-side was called From Sunrise to Sunset. And that's the first, like the part 1 to what became Rising Sun being part 2 here. But that's really pretty obscure, super hard to find, indie 12-inch. So most people probably just have only heard part 2. But there is a part 1 out there. And it's good, you should check it out. Both songs are good. Bon V is good too. So I'm not going to get too deep into all their music because there's a lot of it. I mean, I just kind of showed you their first EP and single, but they had like full-length album, multiple EPs, a couple more 12-inch singles. And again, just in their very short, they lasted 4 years, basically. Their greatest hits album came out, it's called 48 Months, and that's what that's referring to. They only lasted 4 years. And that's basically, I believe, because Sun Black left the music industry. Because Ashiru kept going on. Boondocks, obviously, as you know, the theme song, he went on to do that. But he's also consistently put out like indie albums and CDs and stuff over the years throughout the 2000s and 2010s. And even recently, like he has some songs online and stuff. He's definitely not, like papering YouTube and Bandcamp with new songs like a lot of artists now are, because he also has a day job where he's an educator, he's, a teacher in Washington. And in fact, that's something I want to talk about, which is pretty interesting about these guys. If you look at the notes for their Cosmology EP, which you're never going to read, so just take my word for it, they talk about how, the plan is to take hip-hop lyrics and make it, educational for kids, and, to explore existing hip-hop lyrics, and you're like, what are you talking about? I mean, it's one thing to say, okay, our lyrics are educational, like, Boogie Down Productions or Jerry the Teacher or something like that, but, this sounds like they're taking out their songs, like, what are they talking about? Now, in recent days, long after the Unspoken Heard thing, and like I said, it sure is an education, he sells books online, which are like workbooks for kids based on popular hip-hop songs and studying the lyrics and then extrapolating that into education and all. And I mean, I haven't actually read any of them because I'm not a kid and it's not really my thing, but it's interesting that that's what he's doing now. And even back then in the 90s, they had that vision and it came true and he's doing it. So like I said, there's a lot of Unspoken Heard music and a lot more Ashiru albums and stuff afterwards. And by the way, Blue Black, he quit the industry essentially. He's basically gone. But if you dig through Ashiru's albums, he does every once in a while pop up to a guest, so he kind of comes up. So he hasn't totally disappeared. He didn't drop dead or anything, heaven forbid. He's still out there. Every once in a while he'll do a song with Ashiru, but basically he's out and Ashiru is consistently working in music. And his stuff, like I said, like with the Boondock song, which kills it, he has a lot of dope new stuff, watch some of his YouTube videos and all. So if you like this stuff, and I can't imagine you not liking this stuff if you're a hip-hop head who's checking my videos, I think you're going to love these sound clips. Then I recommend checking out the other Unspoken Heard stuff, and Ashiru's later stuff. And the only other thing I wanted to touch on again before we leave now is, so we talked about the first EP, Cosmology, and their single, Better Smiley. The Bedroom Wizard, who produced some of the songs on Cosmology, put out his own album in 2000, and this is standard producer album, so it's a whole bunch of songs he worked on with other artists. John Notty's on here, the Super Friends obviously are on here. And what's interesting is there is a demo version of Mid-Atlantic, Ashiru's solo song on Cosmology, their first EP. So this album came out in 2000, but obviously the track itself predates Cosmology. And it's pretty dope. It's interesting. It sounds very different. Lyrically, it is exactly the same song. I mean, word for word, it's the same. But the instrumental's totally different. It's a bit harder. It's a little bit more raw. It's got like, you know, more loud, distinct samples. It's a little less subtle. But both versions are really dope, and I'm going to play clips of both because it's an interesting comparison. It's worth digging up. I think even if you're an Unspoken Heard fan, you might not have realized that this demo version, which again is very different, so worth, you know, if you have one version, it's worth seeking out both. It's just sort of floating out there on the Bedroom Wizard album. An album I recommend, you know, for other reasons too. It has a Super Friends Off to See the Wizard on here. That's a great track. So anyway, let's listen to some clips from Unspoken Heard, including both versions of Mid-Atlantic and some of their other stuff. Until next time, see you later.
Peace to violence. Through this madness, I persist to be a soul bro. You know, official black man, I let my soul glow. Live in the DC area, but don't go. I got that shit to make my brethren scream, bo. While you ducking, diving, and hiding from the po-po. With 3 O's chilling inside a stolen Volvo. I be repping and retracing your step in slow-mo. Just to show you exactly where you made that no. Don't try to battle me, man, them rhymes are so. When I rip, my competition be a no-show. I love women from light skin on down to cocoa. Either skinny like the brat or fat like yo-yo. Now these rhymes that I write are just a promo of the skills that I'm running by you like Flojo. Take some time and redesigning your current status of rhyming. Until then, your operations are no-go. All these childish territory semantics, schemes of cream seem to sink like the Titanic. Your throne is overthrown, your money don't panic. It's different, isn't it? It's from the Mid-Atlantic. I see the fear in your eyes, you running frantic. Just a minute ago, you were so gigantic. Them street war stories sounded so romantic. But this is different, ain't it? It's from the Mid-Atlantic. Man, you ain't dope. I'm the great black hope. Smack the Don in Milan. Lasso the Pope in my rope.
7 Heads Entertainment.
Through this bullshit, I persist to be a soul bro. You know, official black man, I let my soul glow. Live in the DC area, but don't go. I got that shit to make my brethren scream, bo. While you ducking, diving, and hiding from the po-po. With 3 O's chilling inside a stolen Volvo. I be repping and retracing your step in slow-mo. Just to show you exactly where you made that no. Don't try to battle me, man, the rhymes are so. When I rip, my competition be a no-show. I love women from light skin on down to cocoa. Either skinny like the brat, I'm fat like yo-yo. Now these rhymes that I write are just a promo of the skills that I'm running by you like Flojo. Take some time and redesigning your current status of rhyming. Until then, your operations are no-go. All these childish territory semantics, schemes of cream seem to sink like the Titanic. Your throne is overthrown, your money don't panic. It's different, isn't it? It's from the Mid-Atlantic. I see the fear in your eyes, you running frantic. Just a minute ago, you were so gigantic. Them street war stories sounded so romantic. But this is different, ain't it? It's from the Mid-Atlantic. Man, you ain't dope. I'm the great black hope. Smack the Don in Milan. Lasso the Pope in my rope.
I'm getting nicer, more preciser. Son, I'm doing mine just to slice ya. I'm a master, or getting the beat. I leave a taste in your mouth like Shasta. Yo, I'm a Supreme Court judge, pimp and pastor. It gotta be reality like Stevie. BVDs and leaves with good trees. As I mix up this mise and place and oscillate. As we go a fuego to a suego. I lay low like I don't flow, but you know I can go off the tippy and drop the tip top in hip hop. That drip drop off a tree like but do he? You tell me, ha. Do your part and support the art you like. 2 turntables and a mic. Listening to me bugging, drugging you, plugging into another part of you like art you or will start to. When you do your part and support the art you like, ha. 2 turntables and a mic. 2 turntables and a mic. I'm trying my best to be a better MC. The best MC I could be. I'm trying my best to be a better MC. The best MC I could be. Yo, hitting them L's hard, about a pack a day. Matter of fact, if you count it, that's a sack a day. Celebrate and come down. Brigadier and disco down. Africans gather round to see the Kingston King dressed like a clown. Why he dance so? To show he still get power as he lays his life down.
So, throughout the whole story, never do the children get to see their father grow up. Because the father always dies, and the child gets to see the father die, but the father is not around to give wisdom to the son. And that's just basically how everything's been going for so long that we don't know any different. It's like children you know, were brought over here from African slaves just because.
Yo, this is the story of the setting sun, getting set to pass wisdom on to his son. Yo, this is the story of the setting sun, getting set to pass wisdom on to his son. Yo, this is the story of the setting sun. My only son saw me die, he was screaming, Paul, why? I took a look at the look in his eye. He was shook, but the soldier refused to cry. He was 13 and green, seen the whole scene. Too young to understand, too old to intervene. So I'm lying there, dying, trying to share, telling him he has to act like he just don't care. Yeah, retaliate when hate is in the air, and demonstrate the might of this holy warfare. See, we in the world where nobody really cares, and the caveat they carry is that everything is fair. Yes, yes, y'all, you don't stop, keep it on, it's shocking the place, yeah. Yes, yes, y'all, you don't stop, keep it on, it's shocking the place, yo. When this brother is mocking me, it shock you when it shock me. Mockingbird MC. When this brother is mocking me, it shock you when it shock me. Mockingbird MC. Yo, young lion in the brush, don't rush. Be peace and blush and piss. Get right like us and lift. Master the art from the gift. Kenzonzi, specialist. Rhythmized rhyme that persists. Twists and turns and learns to exist and earn. While learning the ritual, sacred, habitual, spiritual. All is to dance in the physical, enhance with the lyrical. To fight off stereotypical. Fortify with facts and empirical. But I'm speaking in abstractions. Black form factions. The art and the power of attraction. Building up the party interaction, manipulate reality with action, seeking solitude and satisfaction. A shapeshifter, a seeker, I speak a mid-range bass tweet to the beat. I repeat a funk flow in a demo. Yo, but here's Smiley go. Mocking me, it shock you, it shock me. Mockingbird MC. When this brother is mocking me, it shock you and it shock me. Mockingbird MC.
My rhymes, they run the gamut in a vast array. Competition is none, son, they all passed away. When the day is done, you know I'll be the last to stay. Cause I'm one of the best that hip-hop has. Little bit of head nod in me, you're just a god in me. Moving my body, not a commodity. I'm analogous logically and phonically, phonetically, sonically, kinetic like comedic cosmology. Ash love trees like Arbor Day, make pennies like Hardaway. So God, I pray to know what card to play in this daily quest for equality, peace, and happiness. Void of stress with the plethora of what
I'm groomed to the boom bap, the trap drum, and flat sums. See, my sword is a pen, and I'm a swordsman. Cutting ass like my name was D'Artagnan. My manner is grand, but check out my companion.
He's just a nigga like me, a nigga like nigga like a nigga like a nigga like a nigga like a nigga like me, like me, like a nigga 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 like me. The kind of nigga that I am, I don't conjugate, I just be and conversate freely with these ebonics. Fill up your whole room with my ill sonic boom transmittal. It'll be one of them things where you caught in the middle with your broke second fiddle. Call me the Stradivarius and bring your ass inside this new age of Aquarius. It's so hilarious how when I rip into my verse, all these hard overconfident niggas be like, they can't believe it, but you should seek it then know without a shadow of a doubt in battle I go all out.
By the way, my dad took that picture.